I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Excuse me, this is the golden age, so I need you to be a little happier.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Cut, print, you are hired because your geek history lesson on the golden age Batman is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I am Jason, sometimes wears purple gloves, Inman. Welcome to the Mine University of the podcast of Geek History Lesson. Now, we call this the Mine University because this is the podcast where you're going to come in and learn. You're going to sit behind a desk. We're going to take a marker. We're going to rub it all over a dry erase board. And we're going to draw it into the image of a bat because this episode is all about teaching you about Batman, but not the Batman that you know about, not the normal one who wears armor, not the Frank Miller one who punches people into the mud, not the na Batman. Woo. We're talking about which Batman is this, Ashley?
Well, we are talking about the Golden Age Batman, the first Batman, whoever Batmaned in the land of Batman.
Yes, so we've gone back in time and we're going to tell you about the origins of the Batman character, where he came from, where some of his villains first appeared, because we are knee deep in Batman v Superman fever, because that has gone crazy in the state of Ohio. I don't know if you've watched the news reports. State of Ohio loves Batman v Superman.
On fire with Batman v Superman. Excellent. Yes. And when we get into History 101, I will explain a little bit more about what exactly this Golden Age thing is.
Great. So can we light up the bat signal and jump right into the first section of this podcast?
We surely can.
Yes, the 10-cent origin, where Ashley is going to teach you the little pieces, the small cliff notes and batarangs of the character of the Golden Age Batman. So if you ever go to a classy 1930s Great Gatsby shindig, you can tell everybody about Batman.
Heck yes. And yes, this is Golden Age Batman, so you're going to be like, but there was Batman Inc., but we're not talking about that right now. He is, of course, a DC Comics character, arguably the most iconic. His first appearance was in Detective Comics number 27.
Published by Detective Comics.
Exactly. On brand. In May of 1939, putting him about a year after Superman first being published, created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane, because editorial came down from the sky and they said, we sure do need someone more street level and more darker than the Supermans. Mm-hmm. His alter ego is, of course, famously the fabulous billionaire Bruce Wayne. His aliases, which don't really come up until later, but the best one is probably Matches Malone. And his team affiliations at this time include basically the Bat Family and the Justice League.
The Justice Society, probably.
Yes, the Justice Society.
There's no Justice League right now.
And his abilities basically break down to he's real rich. He's got some toys.
He's got a lot of money.
The idea of the genius level intellect, the peak human conditioning, all the things that we usually joke about when we're talking about street level characters, that's a much later addition to the Batman canon. So that is your 10-cent origin on the Golden Age Batman.
The Golden Age Batman, who, as we said in the intro, sounds like this.
He does.
Kind of like Bud Collyer.
Ironically.
Yes.
So why don't we move right on to the next section of the podcast?
The Meet Cute section, where we're going to introduce to you where we first met this character, specifically the Golden Age Batman, in our lives. That's what we do with the Meet Cute section, because it's so cute. Ashley, where did you first meet cute Golden Age Batman?
Okay, so here's the funny thing about Canada. Canada is a funny place. I was in...
It is a funny place.
It is a funny place. I was in a church one day.
What? The Church of Batman?
I freaking wish. At the Sunday school. And for some reason, we were watching, I think it must have been a tape of the old Batman TV serials, because I guess that was godlier than the 90s animated series or like Batman 66 or anything like that. But yeah, that's the first time I remember meeting, like, because I thought he was so goofy compared to the animated series, because that's the Batman that I was used to.
Okay.
So we used to watch the old Batman serials when I was in church.
Really? The Batman serials?
Well, it was Sunday school, and they were like, "This is inoffensive."
I'd be honest with you, I've never seen them.
They're weird.
I know they just...
And Robin has curly hair.
Yeah, and I know they just kind of like, the Batmobile is just like a Studebaker.
But that's what it was, and we're actually going to talk about that. The Batmobile is a much later invention of the Bat canon.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool.
So where did you first meet the Golden Age Batman? I'm going to assume it wasn't a church.
No, I didn't go to the Church Church of Batman, although, man, I want to go to Canada and see the Church of Batman.
It's a pretty cool place.
I would have loved to seen how they tied those movie serials into the Bible lessons.
It was an Anglican church, so pretty progressive as far as your churches go.
Now you see at this moment, Robin is actually Jesus.
Robin would be your Jesus figure, and Batman would be more of your Moses figure, if we're going to be honest. We don't mean any disrespect. We're just having fun.
So Golden Age Batman, I first encountered Golden Age Batman because I was able to read Batman #1 in late junior high. Now, in my small town of Stark, Kansas, I had a friend named Dennis. And Dennis, he is not the coolest dude. At the time, I thought he was okay because he had this big, giant archival editions of Action Comics 1 and Batman #1. And they were huge, they were crinkled, and of course he tried to sell them as the original editions, but I loved them. He let me borrow them.
Nice.
And I read Batman #1. I remember reading the first appearance of the Joker, first appearance of Catwoman, who's called the Cat
yes, she
at
is.
the time. It has a very famous cover where Batman and Robin are leaping into the yellow, and as I like to call it.
I have a pillow with that cover on it.
Yeah, that's the first time that I ever remember the Golden Age Batman. I went back and I've reread some of the Golden Age Batman because I remember I wrote an article for a website about how many times Batman killed somebody and stuff like that, because he did.
Because it's a lot.
And I sort of became obsessed with Batman and his purple gloves.
It's a great look.
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons that Greg Capullo revisits it.
And that's what I love. That's why I love that he brought the purple gloves back. But that's my first encounter with the Golden Age Batman.
Very cool. Well, why don't we move right along, because this is going to be one of your lengthier lessons here at the Mind University.
Well, Batman deserves nothing less, especially since we've entered the Mind University, or let's say the Church of Batman, to learn about the Golden Age Batman. Professor Ashley, or should I say Mr. Ashley, as we're going to enter the Church of Batman, gives us everything that we need to know about Batman. And I assume we're going to get some caveats.
Yes. So
because you love them.
I do love them so much as a tenant of my church. What is the Golden Age? Well,
I know.
Okay, what is it?
It's a miniseries in the 90s written by James Robinson.
That is not a wrong answer, but it kind of is.
Oh, okay.
So for the purposes of Batman, the Golden Age goes from about 1939 to 1961.
What?
1939 is, of course, when he first appears. 1960 is when he joins the Justice League.
Oh.
And 1961 is when Batwoman and Batgirl become a main part of his canon. So we go from being the dynamic duo to the Batman family. And these joining the Justice League and then bringing in these other Bat characters are big shifts for his character.
So that's where the character shifts.
That's where the demarcation
interesting.
is made.
Again, because most people say that the Golden Age ends in 56 with the first appearance of Barry Allen the Flash.
And that's not incorrect,
yes.
But I just think this is a more interesting version.
Interesting. Okay, because Batman's stories are pretty much... It's not till 61 when Batgirl shifts that's the shift.
Well, yeah, there's a big tonal shift after that. You get a lot more of the silly covers. You get your rainbow Batmans. And that's not a tenet of the Golden Age. So,
okay, got it.
So we're going up to about 1961, although, of course, the focus is going to be on the first few issues because they're pretty special.
Can't wait till we get to the Papa Spank issue.
We're sure not going to talk about that.
Oh, you don't know? Just to explain to our listeners, there's a very famous panel of very early on Batman where there's a black-haired woman and Batman is literally slapping her across the face, and in his word balloon it says Papa Spank.
Yeah,
and
it's troubling.
It was literally published that way.
Yep. Yeah.
You can go if you Google Batman Papa Spank, it will show up.
It sure was the 30s. So here is what happens in the first issue that Batman ever appeared in, Detective Comics number 27, The Case of the Chemical Syndicate.
Dun, 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 dun.
Which I think is a great pulpy name.
This story actually has been readapted several times. Most recently, actually, by Brad Meltzer and Brian Hitch in Detective Comics 700, I believe.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, or 800. Was Detective Comics 800 or 700?
It was one of the anniversary issues.
Yes, very recently.
That's not a Golden Age story, so I don't know.
Well, no, I also used to own Detective Comics 600, and it had every version of this story. What was the title story?
The Case of the Chemical Syndicate.
It was the case of the chemical. Every version that had been done over the last 60 years, it had every one of them in there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's also funny because it has very little to do with the Chemical Syndicate, really. So Bruce Wayne is this rich, dude in his 30s, which means that he looks like he's in his 60s. And he's hanging out with his friend, Commissioner Gordon, who's this, older guy in his 40s, which means he looks like he's in his 80s. And they're hanging out. 30s, They're hanging out at Commissioner Gordon's house, and they're smoking pipes, and they're talking about how great they are. And then suddenly Commissioner Gordon gets a phone call. And he's like, oh, golly gee, Bruce, I sure do have to go investigate a murder right now. You should probably go home. And Bruce Wayne's like, well, I got nothing better to do. Why don't I come along? And Commissioner Gordon is like...
He went on a ride-along. That's okay.
He's like, why? But not only does he go on a ride-along, he goes to the crime scene and he touches stuff.
Oh, okay.
He like tampers with evidence.
Well, see, that's how you set up your identity as a bumbling millionaire, by like touching all this stuff, because then later when they meet Batman, they'll never think that Bruce Wayne is the world's greatest detective, because he's literally putting his pinky into blood and licking it.
Well, look, I know it's like the 30s and we don't know about forensics, but like, come on.
Or DNA.
Or DNA or much of anything as far as
rights.
crime scene. Yes, as far as crime scene investigation is concerned. And so you see Bruce Wayne while he's there, he gets these really big thought bubbles because it's early comics, and he's doing a lot of deductive reasoning, and he's figuring out a lot of stuff about the crime scene that nobody else kind of seems very aware of. And this is the beginning of the season where they're planting like, oh, this is Batman, this is this alter ego. And while he's doing that, and then he goes home after, you start to hear these rumors about a man dressed like a bat, and he's causing terror in Gotham, and nobody knows what's going on. And then you see a scene where Batman flies in through a window, and he's got the cape and the really funny ears, and it's a very iconic scene that will be copied throughout the Golden Age, sometimes by just copying the same panel with different world balloons, in fact.
I like the look of the Golden Age Batman, though.
I do too. I do too. He looks a lot more like an actual bat.
Yes.
Than I would say than he does later on, even into the Silver Age. So Batman basically figures out that this murder happened because this person was involved in a chemical syndicate. He goes there, he breaks it up, he punches a bunch of guys, he throws some people out some windows, and then like 3/4 of the way through, they reveal that like Bruce Wayne and Batman were the same person after all. And then in the end of the story, Commissioner Gordon is basically like, well, Batman's not that much of a menace.
I do think it's interesting because I've read that issue. It is interesting that they try to do the thing where they try to convince you that Bruce Wayne and Batman is not the same. Like, it's a big deal when Batman takes off his cowl.
I would say for at least the first half of this issue, if you don't know, if you're reading this in 1939 and you don't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman, I think they do a really solid job at hiding it. Now, like I said, I think it's the third scene when he's with Gordon at the crime scene, and you can see him doing kind of the Sherlockian thing. So you're like, okay, well, he's clearly smarter than he's putting on.
Something's up with this guy. Something's up.
But I don't know if I would have made the logic leap the first time I saw Batman to be like, oh, they must be the same character.
Because I think it's in a car, right? Like,
yes.
He's in his Studebaker, as I'm going to just say, because every 1930s car to me is a Studebaker.
It's a roadster.
It's a roadster. And he takes off his cowl, and I think the caption box is like, to be revealed as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And then he drives away.
Yeah, because he does not have the Batmobile for quite some time, in fact.
Cool.
And this is kind of a neat thing, because this is a blueprint for the story that you're going to see from Batman going forward. Batman fights a foe. He does some deductive reasoning. He punches some people. Sometimes people die. Somebody gets saved. He takes off the cowl, and we see a scene with Bruce Wayne. Like, that's basically how you write a Golden Age Batman story. And basically, the Batman, the way that they reveal his identity is, like Jason said, it's a lot of exposition. Yep. There's a lot of words on the page in these comics. That
actually is funny thing of that, because if you go back and read some of the Golden Age Superman, which I have been doing recently, you compare it to Batman, Bob Kane or Bill Finger, I don't know which one it is, depending on who wrote the issue at the time, and Bill Finger wrote just as many as Bob Kane. They love the exposition caption boxes.
Yes, they surely do.
Them. More so than Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Siegel and Schuster are men of action.
Well, they're an action comic, so yeah.
And so here's a really interesting quote that I found from Bill Finger about why they decided to name Bruce Wayne Bruce Wayne.
Okay, cool.
Bruce Wayne's first name came from Robert Bruce, the Scottish patriot.
Oh,
Robert the Bruce.
Robert the Bruce.
Chief of the Knights Templar. So kind of a man of secret society.
Yep.
Bruce, being a playboy, was a man of the gentry. I searched for a name that would suggest colonialism. I tried Adams, Hancock, and then I thought Mad Anthony Wayne, and we had to take the last name.
Oh, okay.
So they wanted Bruce Wayne to sound rich and sophisticated and colonial and important.
So he could have been Bruce Anthony.
He could have been Bruce Anthony, yep. Wow. Or he could have been Bruce Adams or Bruce Hancock.
I did not know that Bruce Wayne was named for Robert the Bruce. That's cool.
It is really cool. I didn't know that either until I found it for this. And
Bill Finger, by the way, there's a very excellent biography out about him. I can't remember. It's like Bill Finger, the man, the legend that you don't know, or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you realize how much thought he put into some of these, and again, he's the hidden partner he finally just got his name into all the credits now, like where it says co-created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, just because Bob Kane had a better lawyer and Bill Finger didn't. But it's stuff like that makes you realize how much Bill Finger added to the mythos, because
Bill Finger invented the bat symbol that you see on Batman's chest.
And he named Robin because of Robin Hood.
And he designed the look of the Joker.
Yep.
So if you don't know a lot about Bill Finger, it's worth your time to go and
hunt down that
do
biography.
some research.
It's a great thing. We might throw it in our recommended reading.
Sure. So let's talk about we're going to talk about the first 6 or so issues of Detective Comics, and then we're going to go on to the important highlights of the golden age of Batman. So the best things about Detective Comics 28 and 29, which are the 2 follow-up stories, is that Batman straight up murders people, notably by throwing them off the top of a building or shooting them. And they
don't do any of the like Batman the animated series where you cut to and you see them fall on like an awning.
No, you just see them go through the glass. It's a 2-part story about a jewel thief.
Okay.
So I just think it's really funny that the jewel heist, is a trope that you'll see a lot in the Batman mythos. We'll build an entire Catwoman character around that in 1940, the very next year. So like in 1939, like the height of being a criminal was like stealing diamonds and stuff. And Batman really hates...
Interesting diamonds, right?
Yeah, Batman really hates to see rich people suffer. So you'll notice that a lot of the victims of Detective Comics are like rich old ladies. And Batman is like, will defend their honor and will defend their family jewels by murdering their assailants. Which is kind of my favorite thing about him. He's really, really violent. It's not until the Silver Age, and that's definitely going to be another lesson, where the idea that Batman doesn't use guns is introduced. And that, of course, is a character tenet that lasts until this very day. It starts to get planted.
The gun thing?
The gun thing, and we're going to talk about when it starts happening.
Yeah.
But he uses guns throughout the Golden Age.
You're telling me about the defending the rich. It popped in that Christian Bale line popped in my head where he's like, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. And I think Golden Age Batman would be like, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you if I throw you out the window.
Exactly. I don't have to save you
from a high-rise building.
If physics gets you first. Detective Comics 29 brings to the forefront the idea of Batman fighting against cults or satanic characters. And again, this is something that you can see highlighted and featured in many Batman stories, including... The one that popped to my mind right away was Batman the Cult, which was made popular in 1988 as a standalone series by Jim Starlin with art by Bernie Wrightson.
And I might be jumping ahead a little bit on your lesson, but I do remember there is a story where he fights werewolves, and I think he shoots them. With a gun.
Yes, that's something that happens in the Silver Age too, because as soon as Werewolf by Night becomes a thing, and Batman, of course, there's a lot of parallels to be. We can talk about that right now. A lot of parallels to be drawn between him and a vampire or vampiric character. So, vampires versus werewolves is a very classic mythology and horror storytelling trope. So, it's this comics, this is pulp. We got werewolves. So yes, Batman will often fight werewolves, but he always seems to have a silver bullet in the utility belt.
Because you have to be prepared, Ashley.
Yeah. Normally what happens in those stories is that Batman has like a young associate, kind of like Harvey Dent will become when you see the Two-Face character introduced later on. A young associate who's like a successful lawyer or a businessman. And Bruce is like, come out and party with me because I'm a playboy and you can be a playboy and we'll be cool playboys together. And then the young associate's like, oh, I've got a headache and I can't. And then Bruce is like, gee, this always happens. And he never comes out and parties with me. And he'll follow them. He'll discover that they're a werewolf. He'll try to help them. They'll fight. He'll shoot him. And that will cure the lycanthropy instead of actually killing him. So yeah, that's how Batman fights werewolves.
It works.
The cult storylines for me are always very silly, even when they're done in the modern age. But both Bernie Wrightson and Bill Finger, they're worth spending the time with them because I think they're both kind of the best elements about these two respective stories. Like
Bernie Wrightson?
Well, because the Bernie Wrightson did the art in Batman the Cult.
Okay.
The kind of the 80s version of this.
Bernie Wrightson didn't draw in the Golden Age.
No. But if you want to read the Cult, like read it for the art.
Okay.
Because the story is
back to the purple gloves.
Is a little silly. Yes, back to the purple gloves.
Back to the purple gloves.
And this same issue, Detective Comics number 29, it is a very classic cover, and it is it's kind of yellow in the background, and then you see Batman with his cape flared out behind him swinging through a gothic castle glass window.
Okay.
You've seen it reprinted on poster board. You've seen it on pillows. You've seen it on those weird metal sheets that they sell at the Hobby Lobby. It's just a very classic cover. And this is also, number 29 is the first appearance of Batman's classic utility belt.
Ooh.
In its yellow glory. Batman had kind of a little belty trunk thing going on.
Yeah, it had like circles on it and weird capsules and stuff. Yeah.
But this is the first time it is colored yellow, and this is the first time that it has all the pouches filled with the gadgets that we come to think of the utility belt. You know, the one that you can buy from the comic book store.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and this issue also introduced the character of Dr. Death, a.k.a. Carl Helfern, who's a scientist supervillain that features prominently in Batman stories throughout the Golden Age and into the Silver Age, and then around the mid-60s, he kind of dies out and we never see him again.
No, he's still around. Grant Morrison has used them,
but not in the same prominence.
Sure,
he doesn't become part of the rogues gallery the way Joker and Catwoman are really your only two Golden Age rogues that carry on through Batman.
Grant Morrison loves Dr. Death. He's used them quite a bit.
Right, all your weird people who like their callback stories like Dr. Death, but he's featured most prominently in these early stories.
Gotcha.
So here's an example of how your earliest Golden Age Batman spoke. Now I don't do a Batman voice, so you gotta imagine.
All right, so feed me the line, and then I'll do it back.
Who sent you? May I ask? Your choice, gentlemen. Tell me, or I'll kill you.
I don't know if I can remember this.
Okay, who sent you?
Okay. Who sent you?
May I ask?
Who sent you, may I ask? Tell me, gentlemen, or I will kill you.
Close enough.
But take that same line. Who sent you, gentlemen? May I ask? Tell me, or I'll kill you. Which is better? Come on.
Well, yeah, for sure. But the thing that I think is very funny about this very early Batman dialogue is he's definitely nose to the ground. I'm going to get my job done, Batman. But he's real erudite and polite about it. He's like, gentlemen, please.
He's a polite murderer.
The politest, murderiest superhero you can think of.
There you go.
Detective Comics number 30 brings Dr. Death back into the fight. And initially, Batman wasn't just Batman as you think of it written on the page. It was Bat-Man. Mm-hmm. And this is the first big introduction of the Gotham City Police Department. You do see it in Detective Comics number 29 because that is the first time that we meet Jim Gordon. But this is the first time that you actually get to see like more than 3 cops on a panel, and they all get names, and you start to build these characters. None of them carry through past maybe 1 or 2 issues. Like you're not meeting Bullock or anyone right here. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time that you get to see the GCPD kind of take a role of prominence. It's also the beginning of the, quote, bumbling buffoon police department.
Oh, kind of what they do in Batman 66.
Yeah, that becomes a big part of the Silver Age. I mean, of course, when you're telling this kind of story, you're going to have them be less capable than Batman, but I would say that if you're a policeman, this might border on disrespect.
Got it.
But it also makes for very funny reading because they're kind of falling all over the place. It's a little bit of a precursor for Alfred, I would say.
Okay, cool.
Your original Alfred. And the way that Batman gets involved in the drama of Detective Comics number 30 is that he's sitting at home reading his newspaper, smoking his pipe. Bruce Wayne smokes a lot.
And he wears a lot of smoking jackets, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
He does. The very sexy crushed velvet.
It's very funny because that's what comic books thought rich people did in the 30s.
Which is funny because I don't think anyone in the comics knew any rich people.
No. Especially like right after the Depression.
No, heck no. Yeah. So he's reading this newspaper and he comes across an article about the untimely demise of Mr. Jones.
No, that's a great song title.
The untimely demise of Mr. Jones. Copyright Geek History Lesson.
Mr. Jones. He got thrown out a window by Batman.
Not quite, but a good guess. And Mr. Jones, of course, has left a rich widow, Mrs. Jones.
Mrs. Jones.
And I feel like this issue of these really early ones is the most reflective of the fact that it was published in 1939 because Mrs. Jones is being blackmailed by Dr. Death. And if he is successful, she will lose the fortune that she managed to hold on to during the Great Depression. Okay. So they're not as rich as they used to be, but they're still pretty rich, and she wants to like hold on to the dregs of what she has.
Is it because she converted it all to diamonds?
Well, she is preparing to hand over her family jewels to get Dr. Death to leave her alone and let her keep her bank stocks.
Do families keep jewels anymore? I don't think that happens.
Not my family.
Yeah, not mine either.
I mean, my mom has some pretty cool necklaces. Yeah, but they're made of glass.
But nothing that's like, oh, if you sell this, you can buy a house. You know?
Mom, if you do, please let me know. And Batman, of course, can't stand to see rich white women in trouble, so he lies in wait outside her home, in the bushes, on the ground.
In the bushes?
In the bushes. And he fights Dr. Death's henchmen as they come to attack her, ultimately saving the day, kind of null and voiding the blackmail, and then Mrs. Jones goes to the newspaper and talks about how wonderful Batman is.
Mrs. Jones.
The untimely demise of Mr. Jones.
Affected by the untimely death of Mr. Jones. We got something here, I'm telling you. Let us know, listeners. We got something. This is the golden age hit.
The golden age of Geek History Lesson records.
Got a very Simon and Garfunkel feel.
It does, but that means we have to go on for like 6 minutes and just repeat the chorus over and over again.
I'm fine with that.
Because Scarborough Fair, they do the chorus like 60 times.
Untimely demise of Mr. I'm writing it down right now.
Do some Foley work.
Yep. All right, we're good.
All right, so Detective Comics number 31 is, of course, the next issue. It is also a very iconic cover. It is the one where you see Batman, a bust of Batman from about your chest up, and he's looming down over the cover looking at a mountain and a mountain pass.
Yes, you've seen that. That is also homaged by Frank Quitely in Batman and Robin number 2 with the Dick Grayson series.
I knew you were going to know that one. I have a little picture of it in my notes.
Yep.
This is the first appearance of Golden Age Batman villain, the Monk, who's basically exactly what you imagine him to be.
Okay.
He's an evil monk.
Is it like the Mad Monk from Doctor Who?
No.
Oh, okay.
He's a little more religious than that.
Oh, he's more religious?
Yeah, he thinks Batman is against God.
Okay.
Fun fact, Detective Comics number 31 is the first appearance of Batarangs.
Ooh. How do they look?
They look like bats.
Like actual bats?
They look more like actual bats than the kind of iconic bat symbol. I'm trying to make it with my hands, like anyone listening can
How crazy would it have been if Batman actually threw
bats?
Real bats? Like he kept like bats in a pouch, like.
Well, he lives in the Midwest, so they'd be like those really tiny ones that eat the mosquitoes.
The guy's like, I thought he was going to throw a weapon at me, and then he threw an animal.
All the bats are like.
Is that a bat sound? That's a pretty good bat sound.
Yeah, thanks. I really like bats. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll know
my
this.
bat sound was like.
You sound like a Doctor Who alien. So 31 is the first appearance of Batarangs. It is also the first in comics appearance of a bat vehicle, because up to this point, Batman had just been driving a black roadster.
Okay.
Jason, do you know what the first on-panel bat vehicle was?
Ooh. Is it a type of car?
I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to have
you can't give me a hint? Like it's not a specific... Like, it is a type of car.
It's not a car.
It's not a... I don't know.
It is the bat plane.
Oh, I did know this. Because it has the bat face on the front of it.
Yeah, it looks real stupid.
And then the wings have the little curves, just like his cape.
Yes, they do. Which the wings are the coolest part. The bat face, I'm glad that they dropped that pretty quickly. I think it's really fascinating that the bat plane predates the Batmobile. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know when the bat speedboat shows up, but it's not in this issue.
We'll get to it soon. Don't worry.
Yes, and this is one of the first issues not set in Gotham City. The action of this issue takes place in New York City, and it opens with Batman saving a man from being murdered by a woman. And it is a big deal in this issue. Batman saves 2 men from being murdered by their scrappy ladies.
Does he throw the ladies out the window?
No, he kind of just punches them and ties them up.
Oh.
But he does straight up punch some ladies in the face.
This might be the Papa Spank issue.
I think it is in Detective Comics 31. But I also think that for Batman is not a book that deals a lot with social issues. We're usually saving the rich people, but it's a pretty progressive paradigm reversal for 1939. I'm pretty impressed that they were like, you know what would be interesting if the ladies punch someone for a change. Mm-hmm. I mean, they won't win because they're ladies, and we still got to keep them down.
It's also because their highest paying customers right now that are buying these dime books of Detective Comics are 10-year-old boys, and the 10-year-old boys think that girls are scary, so then they're like, oh man. Oh, yeah, you punch that girl in the face, Batman.
I just think it's super funny because right now we're currently pre-Batman and Superman crossing over.
Yeah.
And we will definitely get to that. But I think that I think Batman would have a tough time with Lois Lane, because Lois Lane is a pretty tough lady, you know?
I think he'd slap her across the face and say, Papa Spank.
Yeah, but then she'd punch him right back.
Especially Golden Age Lois Lane.
Oh, yeah?
Golden Age Lois Lane is quite different from the Lois Lane that we know of.
Interesting. Moving on to Detective Comics 32. This is the second half of the Monk story. It's just more nonsense in New York. It's really not that important.
Cool.
Detective Comics number 33 is a significant issue because this is the first issue that tells you Bruce Wayne's origin and the birth of Batman. It introduces the tragic backstory, the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and baby Bruce is on panel saying this. by the spirits of my parents. I will avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals. It's 10-year-old Bruce Wayne making this declaration.
Where is he making that declaration? In front of a candle?
Yes.
Okay, I've seen that. I've seen that image and the dots for tears and stuff like that.
Yeah, you've seen it, and you've seen it homaged ad nauseum.
Here's what I find fascinating, because Bruce's oath to his dead parents is kind of an important part of his origin.
It's a huge part of the myth.
Batman Mask of the Phantasm does an amazing scene with it. Batman Year One, where he's like, "Father, help me. Yes, I will become a bat." It's interesting that it was introduced this early.
1939, man. We're less than 5 issues into Batman.
Also interesting, and the reason why we keep making Golden Age references is that the Golden Age Superman is our next lesson, just throwing you out there, or it will be our very next episode. So I'm in the middle of doing all this Superman research. And it's interesting that Thomas and Martha are Thomas and Martha from the beginning.
Yes, they are. Because
that's not the case with Superman's parents.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, Thomas and Martha have and always shall be Thomas and Martha.
It's interesting. So Bill Finger and Bob Kane locked into this origin, and nobody changed it.
Well, they're the Shatners, right? They're like, first choice, best choice.
I guess. Yep.
And the fascinating thing about Batman as a character is that by 1940, in his second year of publication, as this dark and pulpy character in comparison to Superman, he is so popular that Detective Comics DC publishers at the time greenlit the first ever Batman solo series.
It's probably because they had the same success with the Superman solo series.
Yes. And
which at the time, again, unheard of.
Utterly.
Yes.
Utterly. Like he's less than a year into his publication. He already has 2 books that he's leading, because from Detective 27 on, Batman's on all the covers.
Yep.
And he is the prominent story in all of Detective Comics going forward. There are little backup stories, 2 pages, 3 pages, up to I think about 11 pages, but Batman is the star of those. And Batman has never been canceled. He's been rebooted, he's been renumbered, but there's always
he's been continuously published.
There's always been a Batman book since 1939.
Which is
over
impressive.
75 years.
And not many characters can say that.
In fact, almost none.
Well, I think Superman can say that.
Superman can say that.
I think Spider-Man can say that since 1964 or 3, whenever.
Yeah, but that's not 75 years.
The Fantastic Four can't say that.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that in Batman #1, which was published in 1940, this is the first appearance of the Joker and Catwoman. And these are, like I said before, basically the only 2 Golden Age villains.
That's the issue that I read from my crappy friend Dennis.
Well, thank you, crappy friend Dennis.
Yeah.
But these are the only 2 Golden Age villains that really kind of grow to be a threat. And they're 2 hugely significant parts of the Batman mythology to this very day.
Well, especially since Catwoman in that tale is not Catwoman. She's the cat.
Yes, and she's wearing a weird dress.
She just wears a dress. She doesn't even have a costume. Now, can I ask you a question? This could screw up something in your lesson. So if it does, I apologize, Professor. Or Minister Ashley in the Church of Batman. I remember Robin being in Batman #1.
Well, we're going to talk about Robin right now.
Good. All right, cool.
That's literally my next note.
Perfect segue, because I was like, I think Robin's in that tale.
Yeah, so fun fact, Robin, Dick Grayson, Dick Grayson is first introduced in Detective Comics number 38, which was published in 1940. The next month, Dick Grayson / Robin first appear in Batman #1.
It's interesting. Less than a year later, they give him a sidekick. So again, less than a year later, the dynamic duo is already in place. The holy grail of the Bat family already exists. So there's only been 1 year in Batman's entire history where he did not have a Robin.
Yeah.
1 year. That's crazy.
And that's a good argument to keep in your back pocket
about
for
Robin.
any time you go to a party and someone tells you that Robin is stupid. Yep. Because I have that argument a lot.
I do too, because I agree with you. And I've said several times in this podcast, and I believe you have too, to me, it's Batman and Robin, not Batman.
Yes, I agree.
I never see a Batman without a Robin.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you something, and if you don't know, it's okay. I'm just using this as an interesting segue.
Sure.
Do you know, was it Bob Kane or Bill Finger who first came up with the idea of introducing a Robin?
I don't think it was either of them, but I'm going to go Bill Finger.
It was Bill Finger. I don't know if editorial had a hand in it.
I think it was editorial, but I don't know.
I think editorial came along and was like, we need some kids around here.
Yes.
But Bill Finger wanted to introduce Robin as a younger and kind of a sillier analog to Batman because he thought that, quote, Batman needed a Watson.
Oh, it's great.
And I love this so much because
that's awesome.
I love Batman and Robin. I love Sherlock and Watson, but I love that even in the very beginning, the very seeds of what would become this really classic team, they're drawing from Sherlock and Watson. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I love that so much.
Well,
It
it's
makes me
also
so
awesome
happy.
too because Batman, his creation is kind of a combination analog of all these other. He's part the Shadow.
Definitely.
He's part Sherlock Holmes. He's part like all these characters pushed together.
Mm-hmm. I think it also tells you how seriously Bill Finger was thinking about these characters, even though they were like, for lack of a better phrase, they were only pulp heroes. They were only comic book
Bill
characters.
Finger's a smart dude. He was a really smart dude, and he put a lot of thought into some of these things. And I think that thought is the reason why. I think all that thought has paid off, and that's the reason why now Batman's the most popular comic book character of all time. I don't care. Like, you can like Spider-Man, you can like Marvel, you can like Superman. I love Superman. Batman is the most popular comic book character of all time.
Well, there's a joke that we make on Major Spoilers podcast all the time that everything's better with Batman, and these are some of the reasons why. Because this early on, there was this much care given to developing this character.
I think with some of the Superman stuff, I think they accidentally lucked into it. Or they kept trying stuff, but this, from what you're telling me, a lot of this seems like. Very well planned for a Golden Age book.
For a Golden Age.
Yeah.
A little less slapdash than what you traditionally think of these really early characters being.
Yeah.
The introduction of Robin also times up really nicely with when we got the introduction of Batman stopping using a gun in every issue. So up to this point in his first year of publication, Batman basically has a gun.
He has a holster.
Yes,
under his cape. There's a very famous.
do.
There's a very famous cover where he's holding the gun.
Yeah. But when they introduced Dick Grayson, he's really, really young. And they're trying to bring these legacy characters in so they can appeal more. Because like you mentioned earlier, most of the readers are like 10 years and younger.
Yeah. And I remember there is a quote by one of the editors from back in the time where they said that like a big reason why they wanted to go for Robin is because they felt that the readers, the 10-year-olds, could not see themselves as Batman.
Yes.
But they introduced Robin and immediately they were like, oh, I can see myself as Robin. Because people might be surprised by this. And again, Robin's got a lot of flack over the years, which I think is totally unfounded.
Utterly.
There was a time that Robin was more popular than Batman.
Oh, yeah.
Because the kids wanted to be Robin.
That's right. And so because of the way that these comics were being published, there were a couple different editors working on every book because it wasn't like now, like you didn't have your Batman editor. Everyone was kind of doing everything all the time. Uh-huh. And there was a woman who edited Batman a lot whose name was Whitney Ellsworth. And she's the one who decreed that Batman would never kill using a gun.
Good going, Whitney.
So in the Golden Age, Batman did still use a gun, but after the introduction of Robin, he never killed anyone with a gun.
Okay, but he still killed people by throwing them out windows.
And he still maimed them with guns, but you never saw someone die.
He still pistol whip people.
Following Dick Grayson's introduction with a gun. And I think, again, Batman doesn't get a lot of moments of social justice, but this is a very progressive and still very topical choice to make for a character who is bred out of darkness and violence. Yeah. I like it.
That's totally cool.
So DC Comics, Detective Comics at the time, was the most successful publisher of comics in the industry, with Batman and Superman leading the way less than 2 years after creating Superman and less than a year after creating Batman. So they were like, you know what we should do with these characters?
We should team them up.
So at the end of 1949, you get World's Finest. Number one. Which, of course, is the first team up between Batman and Superman. Dick Sprang is an artist who drew a lot of the Golden Age World's Finest stuff, which is one of the reasons why I think it remains so iconic and so beautiful to this day.
Dick Sprang is a very, very classic Batman artist. You don't even realize it, everyone out there, but you have seen a Dick Sprang image and you don't realize that it's him, because he's very classically, there's a classic image of Batman and Robin sort of hunched down on the top of a rooftop getting ready to jump.
Yes.
That's a Dick Sprang image. Jim Lee's homaged it a couple times.
They've made statues out of it.
They made Batman black and white statues, and they made the Robin and the Batman, and I would love, those are awesome. I think they're so good. They're like Batman and Robin, man.
He's also in the Batman black and white statue. He's the smiley Batman with his hands on his hips. That's the Dick Sprang Batman. And even if you don't want to read Golden Age stuff, which shame on you, you should, go Google image search Dick Sprang. He's a special artist.
Yep.
So over the course of the 1950s, we're going to get a little more general right now. Following the end of World War II, popularity and interest in comic books as a medium waned because people had more money to spend on other stuff.
Yep.
But Batman remained incredibly popular, and the sales of both Batman and Detective Comics remained remained almost exactly the same. There was no dramatic shift in their purchase numbers.
Even after the war?
Yeah. I think there was a drop, but not significantly enough that they really decided to change anything in reaction to it.
Because superheroes went out of popularity after World War II.
They did, but everything's better with Batman.
Everything's better with Batman. Okay.
And then in June of 1952, has the publication of Superman number 76, and that's the first time that Batman and Superman ever discover each other's secret identities.
Oh, that's classic.
And we talked about that.
In the Batman v Superman stories that we did last week. Yeah.
Yep. It's a very silly, very special issue.
If you ever want to see Batman and Superman fight over covers, oh, you're in for a treat.
Fight, 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 kiss, kiss, kiss. And the team up led to the inception of World's Finest. And World's Finest, fun fact, was published straight through into 1986 before it was canceled.
Really? I did not know that.
That's how popular World's Finest was.
Well, I mean, it was the team up book. Team up books are, I'll say this.
You're not tied to continuity.
You're not tied to continuity. You get the best of both worlds. And I've heard from so many people at the time that, when you're a kid, you don't have as much money to spend as when you're a grown up. So would you rather just buy the Superman title that's just about Superman or Batman title that's just about Batman when you can buy World's Finest that has both of them? You get more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
I actually wish team up titles would come back. I miss them.
I do too, but I think with both DC and Marvel, because they are so mired in their own continuity and the culture of event comics that we have right now, I think that they don't want to really they don't want to do anything that's not in continuity. That's not kind of serving the greater good. Which
it sucks because I'll be surprised if we ever get a World's Finest book again, because there's that Superman Batman team up book that was started by Jeff Loeb that ran for 100 issues. By the way, great. There are some really bad arcs here and there, but mostly solid. And the new Batman Superman that they published in the New 52, mostly solid.
Yep. And they do take the World's Finest title back, and it becomes a part of the Earth 2 storyline.
Yeah, they give a World's Finest in the New 52 to Huntress and Power Girl.
Yes, as analogs for Batman and Superman, which is
the daughter
really cool.
of Superman and the daughter of Batman.
Yeah. But let's hop back to 1954 because
I guess
1954 is it's kind of a big deal for Batman and Batman in the Golden Age.
Is that when the untimely demise of Mr. Jones was at the height of its popularity?
I'm going to say yes. As driven by a little man named Frederick Wortham, because he published a criticism of the comic book industry that shone a spotlight on Batman comics, called The Seduction of the Innocent.
I know about this, but seriously, let's go find this Frederick guy and beat him up.
If I could, I totally would, because this guy was a dick. So, following the sales of the original Batman titles and Detective Comics they dropped off after this, and criticisms included that children would mimic the violent actions that they saw in comics, which has basically just grown up into the argument that children will mimic violent video games and movies.
Yep.
And extreme homosexual overtones, and that the accusation that Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson are pedophilic lovers.
Okay, I know where this is going.
And this, of course, leads to the establishment of the Comics Code Authority at the end of 1954. The Comics Code Authority is basically a set of guidelines in order to protect the innocent.
There's a little thing that was published that used to be in front of all the comic books that basically they had to send their comic book scripts to get approved by the Comics Code Authority to basically make sure there's not drugs or anything like that. Until actually, it was funny, now it's not on any comic cover.
Yeah.
Because Marvel in the early 2000s just stopped sending their scripts over there and said, screw it.
Yeah, the Comics Code Authority held a lot of sway until basically publishers and creators got together and collectively decided to ignore it.
Yeah, they just basically ignored it because there was no law that they actually had to.
It just completely hampered them.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep us from getting completely hampered by the Comics Code Authority.
What? They're still around and they have guns?
They're a very secretive society now.
God.
They're the ones in the bushes outside. They're throwing people out the windows.
Guys, I can see them.
So if you want to prevent Professor Jason and Professor Ashley from getting thrown out the windows, you need to head on over to patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin, and help us with our protection here.
I can see one of them has a mustache.
That's so terrifying.
It is. The mustaches are terrifying.
Yes, and for $5, you get even more ridiculous conspiratorial rambling on the Geek History Lesson Extra podcast, where today we are talking more about the golden age of Batman.
That's where we really give it to the man.
No. Oh, wait, that's the Silver Age. So head on over to patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin, and help keep us alive inside the windows and away from the authority.
And thank you to all of you that support us currently. You all rock.
You are...
And the Church of Batman gives you one of our most greatest prayers. Na 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 Batman. There you go.
I think that's a Simpsons joke.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, because they're trying to convince Homer to join the cult. So they go, no, leader.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so following the seduction of the innocent, the Batman creative team, the various people in editorial, they were like, we kind of need to shake up our image. And this is when you get Batwoman and Batgirl introduced. If you want a little bit more on that, we did do a Batgirl lesson that you can go and listen to. And this is commonly considered for Batman to be the end of his golden age and the introduction into the Silver Age.
Because he has quite a romance with Batwoman.
He does, and then they make her a nice lesbian a lot later.
Yeah, and I might be remembering. Does he marry her? He almost marries her.
I think they get engaged. I don't think they get married.
Yeah.
If you would like a Geek History lesson on Batwoman,
on Kathy Kane,
hit us up, because I would love to do that.
It's crazy, man. That's a research, and I know Robin gets really jealous, and like there's some weird stuff.
It's weird because that's kind of my favorite thing about this era of Batman, the end of the Golden Age, the beginning of the Silver Age, is they're kind of scrambling, trying to give themselves a little bit of a facelift, and they do they take some weird missteps along the way.
Well, they just are like they keep that Batman sexiness, and they just like make it completely hetero.
Yeah, totally. And by the end of the 1950s into the beginning of the 1960s, Batman stories take a big evolution in the kind of storytelling that they're addressing. They start to get a little more goofy, and they're a little less kind of about your gumshoe detective man on the street. And they begin exploring the realms of science fiction tropes a little bit more,
like
because
all
they were
of DC Comics.
Because they were growing in popularity at the time. We're right about to have Marvel make its big step up, which is all based in science fiction. And Batman's more sci-fi adventures were all facilitated by his associated with Superman, your sexy on-panel alien.
Yeah.
And a fun fact: Ace the Bat Hound,
love Ace,
was introduced toward the end of the Golden Age in Batman number 92, published in 1955. And he has remained a part of the Batman canon up to the modern age, along with characters like Batmite.
Well, he's still, Ace is still, here's the thing about that. Ace is still around because Ace is the dog in Batman Beyond.
Yes.
And he's Bruce Wayne's old dog. And also, there is a dog. Is it a Great Dane?
Yes, he's a Great Dane.
There is... Damian in the comics right now has a Great Dane. He's not called Ace, but he's called Titus. But he's basically Ace.
Yeah, and I was actually just going to bring up Titus because, again, even though like Ace is kind of one of those characters who, as a dog, you're like, okay, so you can maybe live to be like 12, but he's sort of always around. It's interesting that he's led enough of a legacy from having been around since the Golden Age that you have a character like Titus, you have characters like there's a lot of super pets.
Yeah.
And Ace is one of the first. So I like that.
That's cool.
So to end off this lesson on the Golden Age of Batman, I want everyone to know that Batman was kind of a part of a bunch of the one-off JSA adventures in the Golden Age, which all wound up being on Earth 2, which is why we didn't focus on them that much. But he joins the Justice League at the very end of the Golden Age in The Brave and the Bold, number 28, in February of 1960, where he's pretty much remained a team member since.
Yep.
He does have little spats where he leaves, but he's pretty much always been, a key member of the Justice League. And
he's always been a founding member of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's your Golden Age Batman.
Yay!
So why don't we move on to recommended reading?
Great.
This is where we read stuff and recommend it to you. If you want to pick up any of these on the Golden Age Batman, you can head on over to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, or just go to the website and click on that shiny little button that we had installed for you. We have a bunch of pictures of everything that we recommend there. You can click on it. It'll take you over to Amazon. You can buy it. There's a little bit back our way so that we can build some batarangs of our own.
It'll keep the Comics Code Authority away.
God, I mean, the bribery and racketeering. Yep. It's unreasonable.
Too much.
So I'll go first, and I am going to make 3 recommendations to you.
Okay.
The first one that I'm going to recommend is Batman Golden Age Omnibus Volume 1.
Uh-huh.
It is very big. It is a little more on the expensive side. It's a beautiful hardcover volume. This collects all of the Detective Comics and all of the Batman issues up into about 1950. So from 39 to 50, they're actually like really beautifully restored and rendered. The coloring is really good.
And they gave it a new cover by Darwin Cook.
Yes. This is a good one to have. You can also get Batman Golden Age Omnibus Volume 2, which closes out into, I think it goes to 1959.
You mean 1949?
Yep.
Okay.
Because they didn't use the same scale that I did. I would say that if you're really looking to delve into this and you really want to spend some time, these omnibuy are worth buying. It's worth having all of them because the Detective Comics stories and the Batman stories, while they're not tied in because there wasn't such thing as continuity, if you can read them in the order that they were published, you get, I think, a better idea of how the character developed. Because that's what I had to do. I had to jump over to the Batman title at a certain point. And then I would also say that you should pick up the World's Finest Golden Age Omnibus. It's from the same collection. This is all of the original.
They all have the same cover design.
They do. This is all of the original Batman and Superman team-up stories.
Yep. And my recommendation is Bill the Boy Wonder, the secret co-creator of Batman. It is a graphic novel biography by Mark Tyler Nobleman. And since Bill Finger is such a big part of Batman, I think that's worth a read as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, time for the teaching tweet.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the teaching tweet is?
The teaching tweet is where our professor or minister of the Church of Batman,
That's
as
right.
in the case of this, will teach us in 140 characters or less, just like Twitter, what she thinks of the Golden Age Batman.
Golden Age Batman, : murder is boring. Shoot everyone. Adopt orphans. Be a bat. # Team Batman.
It's very beatnik poet.
Well, we're in the 50s now, so that's what all the cool kids do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's my Golden Age Batman.
Yay! Na over.
You best believe that joke's coming up when we do Silver Age.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts on the Golden Age Batman?
It is surprisingly good.
Okay.
Surprisingly easy to get into.
Great.
I had a great time researching this.
Nice. All right, so that's it for the Golden Age Batman. As we've spoiled a couple times in this podcast, next week is the Golden Age Superman.
Yes.
Finally, we're doing Batman and Superman. I can't think of any reason why we're finally covering them except for that giant riotous event that's happening in Ohio. So there you go. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/geekhistorylesson. Guys, go over there, give us a rating and review. It helps other listeners find this podcast that are just like you. And if you want to make suggestions for other Golden Age characters, you can do that where, Ashley?
Well, you can do that at geekhistorylesson.com or facebook.com/geekhistorylessons. All of the appropriate modes of communications for throwing bats through are open.
And you can go head over to Twitter and talk to Ashley at Ashley V. Robinson. And you can come and talk to me on Twitter and tell me how much you want to hear the full song of the untimely demise of Mr. Jones at Jawiin, Jawiin. Guys, I felt like the Golden Age gave me a golden glow. So thank you all for listening. I'm Jason, throwing real bats at you through my utility belt, Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And Professor Ashley, will you please close this session of the Church of Batman out?
Class is dismissed.